Welcome, everyone. Today we're joined by Richard Schoenberger, a retired command sergeant major and longtime detective investigator out of San Antonio. With over 35 years of Army leadership and nearly 30 years of police service, he's someone who's seen it all from organized crime to cyber fraud and everything in between. It's my honor to host you today, and I'll let you introduce yourself.
Well, first off, thank you, Danny, for having me. I am Richard Schoenberger. No longer, I guess you could call me former detective and former command sergeant major, but we like to think once we're there, we're always there. But yeah, I'd like to, just kind of start off and give you some background information about myself. I'm actually was born and raised in Spokane, Washington. Um, and from there, I got interested in the Army because I saw the commercials. Everybody sees the commercials. They're like, hey, I want to go challenge myself. Really did not do a lot in high school. Was kind of an average Joe. I always kind of picture myself as an average guy, but everybody kind of looks at me as something way above average. So I guess that's could be considered a success story. I don't know. But what was interesting is when I joined the Army, we had an opportunity called the Delayed Entry Program, and I had committed to the Army my junior year, and I had no idea what I wanted to do, and they had me signed up to be a cavalry scout, and over the time period that it took that year before I actually shipped to basic training, I think I changed my MOS 3 times. And what they did was gave me the airborne option contract. I didn't have anything to do with Ranger Battalion, Ranger Regiment, or anything to do with that until while I was in airborne school. A buddy of mine uh, basically saw the cadre come down from RIP, and we saw them all wearing these black berets, and everybody was like, "That looks pretty cool. I think I want to try that." So it was another challenge, and we had no idea what we were in for. I've heard stories over the years about them having to grab their duffel bag and run down to RIP, where the cadre for the Ranger Regiment to get into the Ranger Regiment uh, would tell them you had to run down to where they were at, and it was about a mile down the road, a mile and a half down the road with the duffel bag on your back, and I didn't actually have that experience, I gotta say. But we did throw our duffel bags on the truck, and we didn't run with them. And the cadre took us down there, and we ran as a group. And by the time I looked behind me, there was only like 3 guys left that I could even see because and 2 of the 3 guys were the cadre there. And I've always been a pretty good runner in the military because I ran in high school for a long time, but I was just an average, like I said, an average runner in high school. So the Army gave me an opportunity to kind of challenge myself to do things that I had never done before uh, in one aspect, but it was more of a physical challenge too that I really think that a lot of people don't tap into their ability to do things physically until they're able to challenge themselves in some of these special forces elite type units. But really, that's all kind of a side story because after the Army, or after I went through RIP in the Army, we went down and were assigned to. I was assigned to the First Ranger Battalion in Savannah, Georgia. And when I got there, there was no wars going on, so there was a lot of idle leaders with a lot of time on their hands, and the younger ranks that had a tendency to really kind of shape and mold you and see how much you could take as far as being integrated into the Ranger Battalion, because A lot of people see the word Ranger in the Army, and they all automatically associate that with Ranger Regiment, which is not the same, of course. But I didn't have, I didn't, it wasn't really a big success story in the Army, if you could call it a success, because, or in the Ranger Regiment at least, because it took me quite a long time to actually figure out what kind of leadership style I wanted to have. And over those 4 years, I was a recycle in Ranger School, and there were some other things that really, challenged me. Uh, it was there was an injury in Ranger School that sent me home, and the motto in the Ranger Regiment is "Don't come back without the tab." So if you come back without the tab, you're pretty much a failure. So you have to kind of look at that. The regiment does not keep Rangers who do not get Ranger qualified. It's kind of like you're fired from your job and then move you on down the road to a regular infantry unit. But again, I'd just like to emphasize it was a big challenge for me. My body was not as physically developed as I am now. Back then, I think I weighed about 125 pounds, maybe. I was a fast runner, do a lot of push-ups. Uh, it's not the same Ranger Regiment as it was back in the 80s. They emphasized a lot of running back then and very little weightlifting, although it was starting to be integrated. It was more of a self-initiative type of thing, whether or not you did it or not. Now, um, sort of compartmentalize that. My time came up after 4 years, and I was not interested in staying in. I had originally joined the Army for college money. I wanted to be one of the first people in my family to graduate college. That did not happen. My brother beat me to that. I have a younger brother, 5 years younger than me, who passed away, unfortunately, in 2021 from cancer. But anyway, he was the first one in my family to get a college degree. I got out of the Army, and that was while I was in the Army. But I got out of the Army and went back to community college because I was never an academic type and never even really interested in anything except Army stuff, correspondence courses, getting everything I could do to be technically and tactically proficient as a young Army soldier. But while I got out of the Army, I still stayed in the Army Reserve, which is a great option and opportunity for people getting out of the Army because I continued on and stayed in the Army Reserve for another 30 years. And of course, 2019, I retired from the Army Reserve as a command sergeant major. And it was a nominative selection, which means you have to interview uh, and be interviewed by your boss, by a general. I've worked for three two-star generals. Two of them were colonels at the time I worked for them. And I was also very integral in forming the first innovation command, which is kind of part of the Army's Futures Command, where they're starting to integrate a lot of products in the tech world into the Army. And it also gave us an opportunity to kind of see, hey, what do the big brain people in the Army actually do? And that's where I had worked with a few. General Stotts, for one, I know he was on one of your podcasts, but he was a great leader. He was a great mentor to everybody. He was just another one of the guys. You would not think of him as just a general. And when I say just a general, but you wouldn't think of him as a general. You'd think of him as just another soldier because he was willing to do everything by leading by example. And I also had some great generals over the years who needed a command sergeant major that would give them the ground truth, and that's what command sergeant majors do. Um, they get out with the soldiers. They do what the soldiers do. They don't sit back and wait for everybody to do PT and then go off on their own and do their own thing. They get out with the troops. They need to know what the soldiers are actually feeling and then send that feedback back to the commander so he can organize with the command sergeant major what kind of strategies are needed to lead um, these soldiers, keep them motivated, keep them interested. These are things like morale. These are things like education. This is all feedback that has been structured over the years through the Army's leadership development courses and different programs where the senior leaders in the Army have taken their feedback, and even the enlisted senior leaders have taken that feedback and created their own program of instruction as it is to teach other leaders what to do later on in life. Now, I'm going to kind of pivot back to when I got out of the Army back in college. While I was in an Army Reserve, I was still, making my way through the ranks, doing Army jobs. Uh, Not necessarily some of them were the most interesting jobs, but over the years, I've actually had 5 different MOSs at different units so I could stay sort of local. The Army Reserve is not really the local organization that you would think of, whereas the National Guard is going to be more of a local organization. Many Army Reserve soldiers fly to places all over the country every weekend so that they're able to stay in the Army Reserve. And there's 2 ways you can stay in the Army Reserve. You can change your military MOS, or you can travel all over the country. So different organizations have different MOSs due to the structure of the Army Reserve. So, example, if I wanted to be a drill sergeant in the Army Reserve and there's no drill sergeant unit in San Antonio, Texas, I got to become a supply sergeant, or I got to become a communications expert or specialist. I cannot stay in the Army Reserves in San Antonio, Texas, and be a drill sergeant if there's no drill sergeant unit. So that's an interesting thing that people kind of don't have any idea how it might work, but you do have to go to MOS, and it has to be a school that produces the skill sets you need to stay in that unit. Now, in 1993, we picked up from Washington State. My wife is also a retired military person. She's a master sergeant, and she retired around 2016, I want to say, if I'm correct with my dates. But anyway, yeah, it's interesting. She gave me the freedom to go ahead and join the police department, which is what I was studying to be anyway, in criminal justice. As a police officer somewhere, or a federal officer, could have been ATF, FBI, all these organizations, U.S. Marshals. I never applied to them until I actually never applied to them throughout because I wasn't really interested in travel, and all of them required travel across the country. I think you're allowed to stay in one place at the time. I was looking to apply to those organizations for 5 years, and then they transfer you all over the country. So, um, what I did, sorry about that. What I did is basically went through an application in, and it was a long process. You actually stand in line at the time back in the early 90s down here in San Antonio, Texas. And a funny story there. The first time I applied for the San Antonio Police Department, there were 200 people in line. And I walked up wearing a suit, not really realizing, hey, we're just here to turn in our driver's license and get it run to see if you can actually be a police officer, and didn't have 100 tickets. And as I'm walking up to the front door, I see this line of about 400 people, sort of knowing in the back of my head, and maybe I'm late here. And I'm wearing a suit and I got a briefcase, and I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be really professional and everything. And I walk up to the front door, and there's a guy had been camped out all weekend just so he could be the first guy in line. And he's wearing shorts and flip flops and just got out of his tent, shaving and making his breakfast. And he goes, "Hey, FBI." the back of the line's over there. And so I go to the back of the line, and by the time I got there, I was number 300 and something. They cut it at the first 200 IDs that they got to check on through NCIC to make sure you don't have a bunch of tickets and whatever, what have you, to apply. So it's the very early stages of applying to be a police officer. I was like, hey, I'm failing big time as a civilian, right? So I packed my stuff up and I drove back home where we were living over here on the west side of San Antonio, and I sort of told my wife, and she's in the army. She's stationed. She had kind of a unique assignment where she was stationed at one of these reserve centers, but she was an active duty soldier. And I kind of told her, hey, I think I failed here. So I showed up the next month because they do it. They did it every month. I showed up the next month, and this time I show up like on a Thursday night or something. I said, I'm going to be the first person in line. I'm going to, yeah. And so people were plugged into the police station with uh, PlayStations and I don't remember if they had Xbox around, but they would use the power from the police station to turn on their TV and watch TV all weekend. And it was Father's Day weekend, and I was like the third person in line, and from there it's a long application process. Anybody can look that up, know what it is, and I'm sure you're familiar a little bit with that, but. Went through the process pretty seamlessly and got hired by the San Antonio Police Department and started the academy there. The academy was really uh, very interesting. Early law enforcement in the 90s, you have to kind of think this was right after Rodney King, so there was some stuff going on. Uh, but generally, the city of San Antonio has been very good to me and very good to its police officers over the years. They support the police, and there's really no place like a lot of other major cities where you can't drive as a solo officer in a solo marked unit and have to worry about officer safety. And it generally stayed that way for the majority of my career. Now, in 2007, and that started in 1995 on the street. In 2007, having spent like 13 years downtown on bike patrol, um, I actually got into an accident with breaking up a fight. And I think you can let your imagination roam on that one, but I broke my hand. And traditionally, when people get into injuries, accidents, something medical, something going on where you can't do your job as a patrolman, it's time to study for detective because it gives you that extra time. Otherwise, you're going to take off a lot of time, burning vacation or other leaves that you may have required, like compensatory time or something, to study for detective. Because those detective tests, for me, I was not a test taker. I don't know how much your audience might be aware, or you might be aware that certain branches of the military have a tendency to be very good test takers. And I will say this, the Army was not one of them, at least not for me. The Air Force, on the other hand, which, if you're familiar with San Antonio, is a big Air Force town, USA. Uh, they call it Military City, USA, amongst other cities that are maybe called similar. This is a big Air Force town. It's a big Army town for medical people, but a big Air Force town in general with basic training here and a lot of other things going on with the Air Force. They take tests. They take promotional tests, written tests, memorization type tests. We, like any other police department, have a tendency to have a lot of people that are former Army, former Marines, and former uh, Air Force. And it seemed, it might not be that case, but it seemed to me like a lot of the Air Force guys promoted very quickly. Uh, and spend a lot of time, of course, studying for these tests. But On the average, more people in the Air Force seem to get promoted. Well, former Air Force seem to get promoted and seem to be able to transition pretty seamlessly into these civil service tests, where they rank you and you need to score high enough because, if 30 detectives retire out of a police force of 2,500, they got to replace 30 detectives. And if 200 or 400 or 500 people take a test, only the top 30 can have an opportunity to get promoted because it's a seniority and rank. I mean, it has very little implications with seniority and time on service. It has more so to do with it. Hey, if you can memorize stuff or you're a smart guy, you're going to do very well on test taking and get promoted fairly quickly. Versus a little something the opposite on my track in the Army, which was sort of parallel in this at the time. Because I did promote to Command Sergeant Major in 2006. In the following year, I promoted to detective through the test because of the injury. That's how I look at it, at least. Which gave me the opportunity to study for the test a little harder than I had been in the past. Because we all take the test thinking, oh, yeah, I'm going to be the brand newest detective, and I've only got a few years on the department, and I'll do a great job. And then you see this test and realize how you didn't really study as hard as you may have thought you did. And you're somewhere down the bottom where you just get a passing score of 70. So once I went to detective, I've pretty much stayed. It's very unique. Whereas a lot of people you work with over the years is how you make connections and get into investigative units. It's not so much like that now, but back then, there's networking that goes on everywhere, whether that's you as a command sergeant major in life or you as the guy that works at Walmart. Uh, if you don't get along with your employees, they kind of don't know who you are by the time you make rank, and they might not necessarily want to work with you in your unit. So we kind of reached out to a property crimes follow-up investigation unit and back in 2007, and the supervisor of that unit, the captain of that police substation took me in and learned a lot. Filing cases and investigating cases was very interesting. I've I've had you'll probably might write some things down, might want to ask a question later, but I think I've learned more about people and human nature uh, as a police detective than I could ever learn in the Army, unfortunately. And that has a lot to do with interviewing, going to schools to learn how to interview people. It has a lot to do with experience. It has a lot to do with good leadership, poor leadership, and um, just all in all bad leadership over the years on the police department. Not so much in the Army uh, as on the police force. But that being said, I can't really fault an organization that has no professional development for its leaders, which was the civil service side as a police officer. So those that develop their styles generally develop their styles from who came before them. So if you had somebody who's really hardcore and liked to stick by the book on everything and had no flexibility whatsoever, he couldn't squeeze, you know, any juice from the lemon that he needed to get the job done because he was so rigid, then somebody who promoted and worked for somebody like that tended to either follow somebody or follow those style or have nothing at all to do with that style, and things kind of got south on somebody like that very easily on a police department. So those were just the two basic styles. I saw nothing in between, very little in between, and I would say at least 20 first line leaders, supervisors, which we tend to a lot of times equivalate with management are supervisors, leaders are people that get things done. And that's kind of how I've always kind of seen things by experience on the police department. Now, I did move over recently to a brand new organization about a year before I retired that had some young supervisors in charge. Wanted to be leaders, and a couple of them were great leaders. Others wanted to do some things that were probably something that they would later find out didn't really work as well without consulting senior guys that had come into that unit and later kind of said, yep, you were right, type of things to a lot of us older detectives at the time with, 28, 30, 35 years. I mean, there's guys that are still out there in this unit and other units that have more time than me on the police department. But um, when you feel like you're really not enjoying it anymore, it's probably the best thing for you is to get out because a lot of people are counting on you. And I think the worst thing that could happen would be for you to let somebody down because all you're doing is collecting a paycheck every day. Uh, and that stems back to where it all started in the Ranger Regiment in 1st Ranger Battalion, where it was like, look, these guys to your right and left could be going to war. And I just missed the Panama deployment by about 4 or 5 months when I got out and went back to school. And I was like, man, I want to go back in. I want to go back in. And then I found out, hey, everybody's back from Panama already because it was only like a 3-day operation or a 1-week operation. But some of the leaders that came out of that were privates that I trained as a sergeant, turned in to be great leaders down the road. One ended up being a major in the Army and retiring and went to work for CDC, and they left CDC during COVID. Other guys from that unit, I mean, there were so many sergeant majors. I think everybody was made sergeant major that started out as a private in the 1st platoon, 1st squad of Bravo Company, uh, 1st Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment, at least during my era from 85 to 89, because uh, only the squad leaders, it seemed like, became officers later on in life. But some great guys I worked with, great guys. And I still keep in contact with them today, which is a little different than the police department on the civilian sector. I keep in touch with a very close knit group of guys, but it's not generally all the guys that I worked with. And um, outside of that, at this particular time, I don't really do anything on a regular basis as far as like work. Um, that evil word that starts with W. Um, it's not so bad. I've got 6 grandchildren, and my first, I just had another boy from my son. Interesting story on him too. He's a military guy too, and so is his wife. His wife's a West Point graduate of 2023, class 2023. They just had their first child, so um, the kids are having kids now. So that's always a good thing to follow um, when you're a grandparent. But yeah, that's where we're at right now. Can't think of anything else.
Well, I want to tell you, you have a talent on storytelling for sure because it's the easiest job in the world for me when a person knows how to tell an engaging story with lessons and I'm not getting bored at all, which is a very good sign. So
Yeah.
that maybe you should either start your own podcast or join other shows as well because uh, you definitely have a lot of stories uh, and lessons to share with people. So that would be my suggestion. And I know we're running out of time, but uh, I would uh, let you use these 5 or 10 remaining minutes that we have to give a message to the listeners, to maybe young Americans, men and women who are listening to the show. What would you tell them? Well,
I would say this. I would say, look, if you're in high school right now and you feel like, look, I wasn't on the varsity, I wasn't on the first team, I wasn't a state champion, I wasn't, you know, the wasn't means absolutely nothing. It's what you do when you join the Army, when you join a military branch of service that can really do some good for just about any American nowadays, especially in high school. I mean, you don't have to be physically developed and be the strongest. You don't have to be the fastest. You just have to be there when it counts. And if you don't quit, the only thing that's going to make you quit is right up here in your head. So, whatever you want to do, whether that's a police officer, a detective, a sergeant, maybe you want to be a chief of police, maybe you want to be the command sergeant major, maybe you want to be scuba qualified, ranger qualified, maybe you want to be on a special forces A team, Delta Force, whatever you want to do, you can do if you put your mind to it and you never quit. And I think that's the most important message out there. You can take me as an example. I'm just an average guy. Uh, People say, oh, no, you're not average. You finish first in everything. Well, I didn't always finish first, and you won't always finish first. And there's always somebody better than you. There's always somebody bigger than you, but they can't make you quit. The only person that can make you quit is yourself.
perfect. Thank you for sharing that. Well, it was an honor to host you again, to talk to you, to learn from you, sir. Thank you for your service. Thank you for sharing everything. Keep putting the word out there if you want to, because this is super valuable. I think you should. Obviously, up to you. You definitely want to spend time with your grandkids and then your family, but this is something that is, very valuable for a lot of people.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And like like I said, I wish I could come back and say, hey, I'm the leader of Microsoft, or uh, I'm the district attorney of this town, or the mayor of that town. I mean, it's all up to you what you want to do, and at the end of the day, it's what makes you happy. And you know, we have a great opportunity in the United States to have an all voluntary service where people can start from the bottom, and they can become great. They can become not so good. They can do whatever they choose to do. But if you can just burn it into your head, never quit, never quit. And that's just something that I wish I could have touched a little more on lead by example and several things that have kind of kept me going over the years, where it's like I don't ask people to do anything that I can't do. But there are some stipulations here for you, and I get it. You want to make it brief. That we're always told, be brilliant, be brief, and be gone. Um, it's hard to condense everything down, and my kids will tell you I could talk their ears off, and by the time I taught them a lesson in life along the way for them to do whatever they're doing in life, uh, they'll tell me. Dad, can I go now? Dad, can I go now? Can you stop talking? And that always reminds me of me talking to a young soldier. He's probably all he's thinking is, when am I going to get out of here? And the command sergeant major isn't talking to me anymore. And I feel it. I feel it. And somewhere along the line, that happened to me too. But I don't remember who it was. But it caved in. It definitely caved into my brain, and I definitely probably talked too much. But thanks again, Danny, for having me, and good luck to your future endeavors with your podcast going on.
Appreciate it, sir.
All right.